I wanted to start by just saying some general things about IPCC. You know, these reports come along every 7 years now. So this is a big event. They're a pain to do, a real pain. But what distinguishes them is that governments send delegations to negotiate the conclusions, and they sign off on the conclusions. That's been happening since 1990. So this is what distinguishes this piece of work from any other piece of work in the science policy space in the world. It's the first time that the globe has done this. So it's actually an extraordinary effort, and it's unique, and it's of enormous value. In 1990, and I just want to reflect on the coherence of the message just very, very briefly. In 1990, people dismissed the 1990 report, the first assessment report. It didn't say anything. It said something really interesting. It said that it would take at least a decade to detect a human influence on the climate system. That was the core finding of the first assessment report. It ended up taking 17 years, because it was only in 2007 that we could say with 90% confidence that humans were changing the climate system. And I'd want to differ slightly with Bruce on the Working Group 1 hasn't advanced. They've doubled our confidence that that statement is true in the AR5, in the fifth assessment report. So the confidence went up from 90% to 95% that humans have an impact, which means that there was a 1 in 10 chance that we were wrong before. Now there's a 1 in 20 chance that we were wrong. So the confidence has doubled, which I think, that's a massive effort. And I really do think that Working Group 1 has kind of done its work. And as Colleen says, the IPCC had to do work that got way beyond the biophysical side of things. And it's entirely appropriate and right that should happen. So this report, in relation to the last reports, is much sharper in some areas, and I'm talking overall. So our confidence has doubled, and there are some amazing new chapters in it. The work on rural, on urban environments, etc. What people have been talking about. There's also a fantastic chapter on oceans, which is the first of its kind. It's a real standout chapter for those of you interested. So few people actually go back and read the original chapters. Some of them are really riveting reading, because they're not constrained by negotiations. That's the core stuff. The standout chapter for me last time around was the Paleo climate chapter, written by Jonathan Overpeck and others. It's a fantastic piece of work, a real work of scientific art. If you want to go back that far, it's great fun. And I think one of the big new messages is that risks increase substantially above a warming of 2 degrees. That's a big take-home message. So we saw the Africa chapter. There are some big risks below 2 degrees, but for the globe, we've become bold enough to say that once warming is more than 2 degrees above the pre-industrial, risks increase substantially. And that links to the mitigation message very, very powerfully. It means that if we don't mitigate, we do really run into trouble above 2 degrees. And it sets a limit. And I think that is a real powerful piece of work, a statement, and we got it in. I think that's fantastic, and we should really use that and put that in the media and talk about it. If you're giving interviews, that you've got to talk about that big time. Where have we been really weak this time around? There are 3 mentions of the word costs in this report. It's really disappointing. Really disappointing. So, and the only statement says that we have limited evidence that there is a gap between what adaptation costs and what we're going to need. So big letdown. I think we dropped the ball there. There's some very, very useful work in the adaptation game, and there were 4 adaptation chapters this time around, including one on economics, which is why I'm so disappointed. But there's a whole set of work on adaptation experience, which I think is very, very valuable, talking about engineered and technical options being what people are doing, and especially in the disaster risk reduction area and in water management. That's where things are really happening adaptation-wise. There's evidence, experience accumulating in ecosystem-based adaptation, which I think is a fantastic sustainability story. One of the biggest constraints still to adaptation is uncertainty, which affects decision-making and planning. And the best we can do now is talk about iterative risk management, which means doing things over and over again until we know with more certainty what's going to happen, and keeping our options open. So flexibility is a very important strategy going forward. I think we don't make good links between the risks identified and adaptation options. That's a link that hasn't been made strongly. It's a kind of a meta link that we could have made if we'd had another month or 2 to do the report. Thank God it's finished. I'm not asking for another month or 2, but maybe next time, if there is a next time. If there's not a next time, we've dropped a major opportunity in planetary consensus building. And then, the story is around building resilience. So how do we build resilience? And the last word, or I think the second last word in the report, is that mitigation. Without mitigation, we will lose the opportunity to have resilience. So that is underlined right at the end of the report. The final bullet is the second final bullet is around that. The final bullet is around transformative impacts, and we're talking about people moving. That we would, in our chapter, we would call that having reached a limit. If once you have to move somewhere, you've crossed a threshold, you've reached a limit, and you're into something new, and that's an intolerable change. So that is a failure. Actually, we would see that as a failure of adaptation. Another kind of adaptation starts to happen, which can lead to all sorts of things like conflicts, etc. So, my comments. Thanks very much for listening.